Jeb Carter hadn't raised his voice in 10 years. But when the banker took his land and smiled while doing it, Jeb walked into town silent and rode out with the banker's son tied to his saddle. In the small town of Willow Creek, Jeb Carter was known as a man of few words. With striking blue eyes and a weathered face that told stories of hard work, he spent his days tending to his modest farm and helping neighbors with their chores. For 10 years, Jeb lived a peaceful life, not once raising his voice or firing his gun. He believed in resolving issues through kindness and understanding rather than conflict. Everyone in town respected Jeb for his calm demeanor. Children would often watch him work from afar, admiring how he patiently taught them about farming and nature. He was the kind of man who would lend a hand to anyone in need, whether it was fixing a fence or sharing fresh produce. But beneath that gentle exterior lay a strong sense of justice. Jeb valued what was right more than anything else. Even when disagreements arose among townsfolk, Jeb would remain calm, choosing to step back instead of getting involved in quarrels. His friends admired him for this trait, often saying that Jeb's presence alone could quiet even the rowdiest discussions. However, this peaceful existence would soon be tested. As whispers of trouble began to swirl around town, they grew louder with the news of the local banker's deceitful actions. The day Jeb learned about the forged deed was the day his world turned upside down. Suddenly, his quiet life was shaken to its core as he grappled with the betrayal, not just from the banker but also from those he trusted most. Jeb knew that maintaining peace wouldn't solve this problem. It was time for him to take action like never before. The sun had barely risen over Willow Creek when Jeb received the shocking news that would change everything. He stood in front of his modest home, a place filled with laughter and the warmth of family memories. His wife, Clara, was inside preparing breakfast for their 2 children, unaware of the storm brewing outside. As Jeb walked to the bank with uncertainty in his heart, he felt a tight knot forming in his stomach. When he arrived, the banker, a slick man named Mr. Thompson, greeted him with a smile that quickly faded when Jeb asked about his land. Jeb's heart sank as the banker produced a forged deed, claiming ownership of Jeb's property. Rage and disbelief coursed through him. How could someone so trusted turn out to be so deceitful? The very land where he had tilled, planted, and poured his sweat was now snatched away by greed. As Jeb stood there, memories flooded his mind, his children playing in the fields, Clara tending to her garden, and the dreams they had nurtured together. These thoughts sparked a fire within him. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound he had ever faced. Jeb felt lost. He had always believed in handling problems quietly, yet this was too much. When he returned home, the weight of his loss hung heavy in the air. Clara noticed the change in his demeanor and sensed something was wrong. Sitting at the kitchen table, Jeb knew he couldn't let this injustice stand. It was time to take a stand for his family's future. No longer could he sit back and watch as his life was taken from him. Now he had to act. With determination in his heart, Jeb Carter marched toward the sheriff's office, his mind racing with thoughts of justice. Sheriff Davis had always been a familiar face in town, known not just for protecting the law but for being a friend to everyone. Jeb had often admired Davis's unwavering commitment to fairness. But now, as he approached the door, doubt crept into his mind. When Jeb entered, he found Sheriff Davis sitting behind a cluttered desk, lazily flipping through some papers. The sheriff looked up, eyebrows raised in surprise at Jeb's tense demeanor. "What brings you here so early, Jeb?" he asked, scratching his chin. Jeb quickly explained the situation, how Mr. Thompson had forged documents to seize his land. As he spoke, he watched the sheriff's expression shift from curiosity to discomfort. Rather than offering support, Sheriff Davis shifted uncomfortably in his seat and avoided Jeb's gaze. "I can't do anything about it," Davis finally replied with a resigned tone. "The banker has connections around here that go deeper than you think." Jeb felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. How could this be? Hadn't they both stood for what was right? Realizing that the sheriff was choosing silence over action left an ache in Jeb's chest. Disheartened by this betrayal from someone he respected, Jeb's hope for justice started to vanish. The sheriff wasn't just ignoring a crime, he was siding with the system that benefited the corrupt banker instead of protecting an honest man like him. Anger surged within Jeb again, this time fueled by more than just a desire for justice. It was now personal. In the dim light of his kitchen, Jeb sat at the wooden table, staring out the window at the fields that once flourished under his care. His heart ached as he thought of his family's dreams tied to that land. He had always believed in doing things the right way, but now everything felt twisted and wrong. The sheriff had failed him, and he knew the courts would be no different. Jeb's frustration built inside him like a storm cloud ready to burst. How could he trust a system that rewarded deceit? The thought of spending months battling in court against Mr. Thompson, a man who wielded money and influence, filled him with a sense of dread. It felt hopeless, like trying to push a boulder up a steep hill only to watch it roll back down again each time. As he weighed his options, an idea flickered through his mind. It was reckless, bold, and perhaps even dangerous. But as doubts crept in, Jeb pushed them aside. He couldn't sit idly by and let a corrupt man take everything from him without a fight. Perhaps going to the bank directly was his best chance to confront Mr. Thompson. He could demand answers, maybe even claim some sort of justice for himself and his family. With each passing moment, anger coursed through Jeb like wildfire. Rallying his courage, he made up his mind. He would not seek a courtroom, but instead would confront the banker on his own terms. This was no longer just about reclaiming his land. It was about standing up for what was right, even if it meant crossing dangerous lines. And with that, Jeb decided to ride straight into the heart of the problem, armed not with a gun but with sheer resolve. With a determined heart, Jeb rode into town, his mind set on confronting Mr. Thompson. As he approached the bank, his thoughts raced with the risks of his plan. This was no ordinary encounter. He needed to make a bold statement. He wasn't seeking ransom or revenge. He wanted justice and accountability for the wrongs committed against him and his family. Jeb's eyes caught sight of the banker's son, a young boy named Billy, playing outside near the entrance. In that instant, an idea struck him like lightning. Billy was innocent in all this, but he could serve as leverage in a world that felt unjustly stacked against him. Jeb dismounted quickly and approached the boy with a mix of urgency and gentleness. "Billy," he said softly, kneeling to meet the child's gaze, "I need your help." Before the boy could fully understand what was happening, Jeb grabbed his hand and led him away from the bank, mounting his horse with Billy in front of him. As they rode off, Jeb felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear. He knew this act would paint him as a criminal in the eyes of many, yet it was the only way to force Mr. Thompson to listen, to acknowledge what he had done. The risk was immense. If caught, Jeb could face serious consequences. But for Jeb, this wasn't about harming anyone. It was about shining a light on corruption. With determination fueling his every move, Jeb resolved to confront Mr. Thompson directly, this time on equal ground, and make sure his voice would finally be heard. As news of Jeb's actions spread throughout Willow Creek, the town erupted into a flurry of emotions and opinions. Some residents who had watched Jeb work tirelessly and selflessly for years felt a swell of support for him. "He's doing what needs to be done," they would say, gathering in groups around the general store. They admired Jeb's courage to stand up against the banker who had wronged him, seeing his bold move as a necessary act of defiance against corruption. On the other hand, there were those who condemned Jeb's actions, viewing them as reckless and dangerous. "Kidnapping is a crime," shouted Mrs. Hargrove, her voice quivering with indignation as she addressed her neighbors. "What kind of man takes a child to make a point?" Many in town echoed her sentiments, believing that Jeb had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. They worried about the implications of his choices. If Jeb could take such drastic measures, what might stop others from doing the same? The sheriff, caught in the middle, faced mounting pressure from both sides. While some demanded he act swiftly to bring Jeb back, others urged him to find a way to resolve the situation peacefully. This division within the community left tensions high, and friendships began to fray along political lines. As factions formed around Jeb's choices, the atmosphere in Willow Creek grew thick with uncertainty. Would Jeb's quest for justice unite the town or drive it deeper into division? No one seemed to know for sure, but one thing was clear. Jeb's actions would change everything, and the repercussions would be felt long after he rode away. As Jeb raced away from the bank with Billy in front of him, chaos erupted behind them. The sounds of angry shouts echoed through the streets of Willow Creek as townsfolk quickly rallied together, determined to chase down the man they viewed as a kidnapper. Jeb's heart pounded in his chest, but he focused on guiding his horse with precision, navigating the familiar paths that twisted their way out of town. Turning sharply down a side road, Jeb heard the clatter of hooves drawing closer. He pushed his mare to go faster, using every ounce of strength. Billy clung tightly to him, wide-eyed but quiet. As they tore past the fields where Jeb had once planted crops, memories flashed in his mind, a reminder of what was at stake. Suddenly, Jeb spotted a group of men blocking the road ahead, brandishing ropes and tools as if ready for a confrontation. His pulse quickened. He had to think fast. In an instant, he veered left towards an old barn that leaned precariously on its foundation. It was a risk, but Jeb knew these shortcuts well. Pulling into the barn's shadowy entrance, he quickly ducked inside, hoping to lose the crowd in the maze of hay bales and farm equipment. Within moments, muffled voices could be heard outside. "He went this way," someone shouted. Jeb held his breath as he peered through a crack in the wood, watching shadows race past. Just when it seemed they were on his trail again, Jeb seized the moment and took off through a hidden back exit of the barn. With quick thinking and resourcefulness as his ally, he managed to slip away unnoticed into the forest beyond, determination burning bright within him as he continued his pursuit of justice. After evading the townsfolk, Jeb emerged from the forest, heart racing as he approached the banker's estate. The imposing structure loomed ahead, a symbol of all the injustice he had faced. Taking a deep breath, he felt a mix of fear and determination coursing through him. Today was the day he would confront Mr. Thompson, the man who had taken everything from him. With Billy by his side, Jeb strode up to the grand entrance, the weight of the boy's presence making the moment even more intense. He knocked on the door with purpose, and it swung open to reveal Mr. Thompson, whose smug expression faltered when he saw Jeb standing there. "What do you want, Carter?" he sneered, but Jeb could see a flicker of fear in his eyes. "I want justice," Jeb declared, his voice steady despite the anger bubbling within him. He stepped inside, determination hardening his resolve. The banker's office was lavish and filled with symbols of wealth, stacks of money and documents that represented his power. Jeb felt a surge of emotion. This was the man who had used deceit to rob him of his land and livelihood. As the tension thickened between them, Jeb fought to control his rising fury. "You forged that deed," he stated, his voice barely above a whisper yet filled with intensity. "You took what isn't yours." Mr. Thompson's demeanor shifted, anger replaced his earlier bravado. "You think you can waltz in here and demand anything?" he barked, desperation creeping into his tone, but Jeb stood firm. "I'm not leaving without your acknowledgement of what you've done." This confrontation was more than just a demand. It was Jeb's moment to reclaim his dignity and fight back against the injustices that had plagued him for too long. The air crackled with tension as both men faced off, each aware that this encounter could change everything. As the confrontation between Jeb and Mr. Thompson intensified, Jeb felt a surge of confidence as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper, the forged deed that had caused him so much pain. "You think you can intimidate me," Jeb said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Let me show you what true power looks like." He unfurled the document and laid it on Thompson's ornate desk, pointing to the signature that had been forged. "This is not my name," Jeb declared, his finger trembling slightly as it hovered over the falsified signature. "You've robbed me not just of my land, but of my dignity." Mr. Thompson's face paled as he realized the implications of Jeb's evidence. The banker's bravado faded, replaced by fear and desperation. "You don't understand what you're doing," he blustered, but there was an unmistakable crack in his voice. "You're right," Jeb replied fiercely. "I'm putting an end to your deceit." In that moment, the balance of power shifted back to Jeb, who now held the proof of Thompson's wrongdoing. Outside, Sheriff Davis arrived at the sound of raised voices, having been alerted by townsfolk watching from a distance. He stood in the doorway, eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Jeb standing tall with evidence of corruption before him and Thompson nearly crumbling under the weight of his own actions. "Jeb," Davis called out cautiously, "you need to put the boy down and let's talk about this." But the sheriff's tone was different now. There was a hint of respect for Jeb's bravery and a realization that justice might finally be served. As tension filled the room, Jeb faced both men with newfound resolve. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was standing up for everyone who had ever been wronged in Willow Creek. Justice was within reach, and this confrontation would echo through their community long after today. As the dust settled after the confrontation, the atmosphere in the bank shifted from one of hostility to a sense of resolution. Jeb Carter had not only exposed Mr. Thompson's forgery, but had also confronted the very essence of injustice that had permeated his life. Sheriff Davis, who had initially appeared hesitant, stepped forward with newfound respect for Jeb's unwavering resolve. "We will take it from here," he asserted, leading Thompson away as townsfolk began to gather outside, their murmurs filled with a mix of support and disbelief. Jeb watched, heart pounding yet calmer than ever before. He realized that not a single gunshot had been fired during this ordeal, no one was harmed. Instead, it was his courage and determination that had shifted the tide. He felt a profound sense of peace wash over him, transformative in nature. This experience taught him that justice could indeed be achieved without violence, setting an example that would resonate throughout Willow Creek. In the days that followed, Jeb found a renewed connection with his community. The townsfolk were eager to thank him for standing up against corruption and injustice, the very things they had long whispered about behind closed doors. Conversations blossomed on front porches, in shops, and fields as people reflected on their own experiences with wrongdoing. For Jeb, this was more than just reclaiming his land. It was about fostering trust again, a trust that had been long shattered by fear and deceit. The once quiet farmer now became a symbol of resilience and hope for his neighbors. Their bond strengthened through shared experiences, and together they began to envision a brighter future where justice reigned without fear or reprisal, marking a new chapter for the town of Willow Creek. As Jeb Carter settled into a new chapter of his life, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The events in Willow Creek had taught him profound lessons about what true justice meant. It was not merely about reclaiming what was rightfully his or seeking revenge against those who had wronged him. Instead, it was about standing up for integrity and ensuring fairness in a world that often turned a blind eye to corruption. Jeb understood now that courage wasn't just found in grand gestures or loud protests. It resided in the quiet determination to do what was right, even when the odds were stacked against him. By confronting the banker and exposing his wrongdoing, Jeb had not only fought for himself, but also for every villager whose voice had been silenced by fear. He realized that true justice is rooted in community spirit, an unwavering bond among neighbors willing to support one another in times of need. As he walked through Willow Creek, Jeb noticed the townsfolk conversing openly about their experiences, sharing stories that had long been hidden away. They began to unite not just against corruption, but to uphold the values of honesty and transparency. The air felt lighter, as if the weight of injustice had been lifted, allowing room for hope and healing. With every smile exchanged and handshake offered, Jeb saw the rebirth of a community that believed in standing against wrongdoing together. He took pride in knowing that his actions had sparked meaningful change, reinforcing the idea that one person's conviction could ignite a collective fire for justice. Thus, Jeb emerged not only as a victor, but as a beacon of resilience, proving that integrity and courage could indeed reshape the future.